Hello, I'm Toycat, and this is American basketball player Jared Shaw, who recently moved to the Indonesian Basketball League, and when he went into the country, he allegedly attempted to smuggle illegal drugs. This is a problem because under Indonesia's anti-drug laws, Shaw faces up to a life sentence or death penalty if found guilty, which seems quite likely because he did admit to police that he actually wanted to share the cannabis candy with his fellow basketball players. Now, this is a very serious problem because in Indonesia, if they execute you, they can do it by firing squad, and so he might be shot to death by the Indonesian government for having cannabis candy. This is a even wilder story because the package that he brought actually came from Thailand, which is a country that used to do the exact same thing. They were very anti-drug smuggler, and they recently reversed course and actually legalized weed in Thailand compared to everyone else around them. And so I wanted to talk about which countries have legalized weed. It's hugely interesting for travel reasons, I guess. I want to talk about which countries will still actively kill you for having it, and then I want to talk about the thing that you can bring into a lot of countries that you might not even realize is illegal, because most of you watching this video probably aren't going to bring weed across international borders. Pro tip, don't do that. But there are some things that you might do that you'll get messed up on. So yeah, first of all, I want to talk about my favorite first experience visiting Asia, because I love Singapore in many ways, but when you get your stamp into the country, which tells you, how long you can be in there for, you also get this fun warning that says, death for drug traffickers under Singapore law, and it's so fun because they put so much work into welcoming you in a friendly, calm way, but they also make it very clear, yes, we will kill you if you find out that you have drugs here. Even if you're just transiting the airport and you never go on the land side, you still might literally go into a very serious problem for very, very minor amounts of drugs, because Singapore takes a no-tolerance approach. The exact opposite of a no-tolerance approach, though, is Canada, which in 2018 became the second country to legalize recreational cannabis, and I think it's really fun that there are like two opposite ends of the spectrum. There is, oh yeah, you might be killed if you have the wrong number of drugs, too high a number, I guess you could say. And then there's also, oh yeah, if you can buy it from anywhere if you want to. In fact, this was so this story is from the 17th of October 2018. I coincidentally had a flight booked to Canada on the 1st of November. It was to Nova Scotia. It was a $50 flight. It was wildly cheap, by the way. And you can actually see in that video, like, I just walked past, like, by chance, like, oh, this is NSLC cannabis. And so I walk into, like, again, the Nova Scotian Liquor Company, I'm guessing that is. I could just walk into a cannabis store and it's like an Apple store, but for weed. It was crazy. And I think that the tourism benefit to having weed be legal, plus the lack of costs of having to enforce it, means that many countries have started to choose to do precisely this. So blue countries on this map have legal weed, and green have it legal for medicinal purposes. How legal and how strict that is depends on where you are, but you can see that the majority of US states are included here. Mexico and Canada are both on there, but surprisingly, at least to many, Germany, as well as South Africa and Thailand have also jumped aboard the bandwagon. I mean, it also looks like, I'm guessing that's Malta over there, and I also see we've got Georgia on this list as well. I'm surprised by, and Uruguay as well. There's a surprising number of countries which have decided to say, yeah, actually, what's the point in making this big devil's thing? What's the point in making it so illegal? And so you can see that the world is slowly coming on a tide of going from anti-cannabis, it's a drug and so bad, onto a kind of, oh yeah, it's like alcohol. Like, we don't want you doing it, but like, we're not gonna, like, send you to prison for drinking too much. And so this is a very interesting shift that's happening around the world. However, it does come with a lot of caveats, and I want to give you this, excerpt from Wiki Voyage, because again, I think this is useful to anyone who's traveling anywhere. You might not realize this, but if you go to Canada, yeah, it's actually really fine. However, importation and exportation still remains illegal. If you bring weed in or out of the country, and in certain circumstances across provincial borders, you might get into some serious problems. In China, by the way, supposedly drugs are strongly associated with the national humiliation in China as a result of the Opium Wars. Can't imagine who did that, man. Whoever did that should be really ashamed, I personally think. But what's interesting is the fact that, yeah, China, as a result, will actually say that if you have any drugs, hard or soft, if you do any drug trafficking, including cannabis, you might be punished by the death penalty. In fact, China has the largest number of people who have been death penaltied in exchange for their drugs being brought into the country. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you can see as we scroll around here, like, oh yeah, some countries are also like this. Like, okay, so Singapore's on there. For consumption, you still might get 10 years because you're not drug trafficking, but you'll still get 10 years in prison potentially, and you end up with a whole bunch of fun things in here. But what I think is most interesting is the United States. I think that the United States takes the weirdest approach towards weed of anywhere out there, because certain states have decided that recreational use of cannabis is allowed. Officially, the federal government doesn't support this. The federal, in effect, the United States is actually a grey country where it's illegal, like most of this list. However, the thing is, most US governments have decided to kind of let that slide and say, okay, look, we're only going to really enforce it when it's our direct jurisdiction. And so if you are if you're entering the country at customs, even a single copy of the High Times magazine, which should be protected by First Amendment free speech elsewhere, might get you banned from the country for a long time. Or indeed, if you try to bring things between states, because federal law prohibits because of the interstate commerce clauses. Apparently, if you bring weed between states, you get in some serious issues. And so as a result, fun fact, the US has weed both legal and illegal. Most people live in a state where it is legal, but also everyone lives in a country where it is not. And how does that work? Well, you just gotta choose not to think about it too hard, I guess, which is why I would not recommend, if you want to be a weed tourist, going to the, I guess being a weed tourist probably is something I wouldn't recommend in general, but you probably shouldn't do it for the United States. What I do think is most interesting here, though, is if we look at the Netherlands on this graph, this is something I look into every time I go there, because every time you go to the Netherlands, everyone has a friend that's like, oh, this is where weed's legal, right? And you look into it and it's like, oh no, there are things called coffee shops where it's like, yeah, it's not legal, but we don't care. And so it's become a drug tourism issue, which means that certain parts of the Netherlands have kind of made it really, really restrictive to when you can go in a coffee shop. So if you're in the very south of the Netherlands, I think is where it's like most strict. It's really hard to, so if I just type in coffee shop, by the way, I think that it's a really fun thing in my opinion. Coffee shop with no space in between are not places that will sell you coffee, they are places that will sell you weed. Coffee shop with a space in between, on the other hand, is places that will, well, I mean, actually, these are the same places, but this is a real coffee shop right here, because I typed a space after it. It's just one of the goofiest things, in my opinion, and yeah, if you want to go to the Netherlands, weed is not legal, but also you can smoke it everywhere. And so, I feel like it's the exact opposite of the United States. Officially speaking, it's illegal, but in any real practice, it's legal. Whereas in the United States, where most people live, it's legal, but officially, actually, you might just be arrested for it anyway. So watch out, by the way. Speaking of things you should watch out for, yeah, I think those are all of the most interesting cases. So now let's talk about the opposite. So weed is legal in a lot of places. I mean, it's not that legal in lots of others. But what happens if you bring weed into different countries? Well, according to the Harm Reduction International, this is all drugs, 35 countries retain the death penalty for drug offenses. 91 people were executed in 2018. 149 death sentences were given. And 7,000 people are on death row, that is, due to die, due to be killed by the state because of the drugs they've done. Even more interesting is the fact that they actually rank countries by how good or bad they are for weed use, I guess you could say. And so you can see that, like, okay, in the US, in theory, you can get the death penalty for drug crimes, but not in reality. And the same is true for Mauritania, the same is true for India, the same is true for Bangladesh and Myanmar, and even for South Korea, whereas in the blue countries, like, yeah, sometimes you might get killed, you might get the death penalty, but the green countries are like, oh yeah, death penalty for drug users, of course. I mean, you have the death penalty. I mean, really, I think the death penalty is already quite a wild thing in itself. Like, I find it very hard to justify giving anyone the death penalty, but these people are like, yeah, I mean, we all know that weed and murder are about the same level, and so if you want to prevent your populace becoming, having a problem with this, then what you got to do is you got to kill the filthy drug users, and that's exactly where Indonesia sits, which is why, if you're a basketball player from the Utah state, you should be at least a little bit concerned, I think. In reality, in high-profile cases, you might just get off, but if you're not an American basketball player, and you bring weed into Indonesia, you might literally be signing your own death sentence by firing squad, and I just want to give everyone watching this the reminder that the world is a scary place, and I also want to give a reminder about, we talk about this kind of like Western world order, like what is it that actually the West has in common in terms of Europe, North America, like the tolerant bits of East Asia and Australasia? What is it that we actually share? And I think that a lot of the things that we think of as like being standard. So like, again, I think most people think that if you're anywhere in the Western world, you shouldn't be killed, probably in general, but ideally you shouldn't be killed for minor offenses. That there should be a little bit of like, okay, this isn't fine, but whatever, I guess, but this is actually something you have to work really hard for. Even if you are someone who is, I think that it's something that it's notable is that like Thailand is the first country in Southeast Asia to legalize this, and that is actually a hard sell. That is something they had to argue on tourism grounds, whereas any European country can just do it tomorrow. Indeed, like apparently Germany did. And I think that's a hugely interesting, a difference that we have, like a superpower in the West, the ability to do these things, and it's something that we should all be appreciative of. That like actually, yeah, it's not just any country can legalize all drugs tomorrow. Most countries choose not to for all sorts of reasons, political instability, the ways it will affect their population. The fact that we can get away with it is something that we should be slightly thankful of. Or maybe you hate drugs and you're saying, Toy Cat, what are you saying? But if you do hate drugs, then you might love the way Japan works. I want to give you the most important travel advice that I don't think anyone usually gives. Do you want to go to a major tourism hotspot, maybe including somewhere in this quote-unquote Western liberal world order? Pro tip, look up what is okay to bring into the country. An interesting example of this is Japan, and I looked into this, like, because I used to, when I started traveling more in, like, the early 20, around about the time of this video, actually, the late 2010s, when I started doing a lot of traveling, I started to get, like, traveler's sickness, I think is the polite word for it, and so I started to bring a couple of, like, medications around with me, just to make that easier, and I noticed one of the countries I went to was like, oh yeah, that might actually cause you some issues, and then I looked into what Japan had, because I went there for a few weeks, and interestingly, they're like, oh yeah, if you bring Vicks inhalers, or cold and flu medicine, or over-the-counter painkillers that contain codeine, or even medicine for allergies and sinus problems, you might actively be deported, and again, I feel like it can get even worse than that if they feel like it's a too high of an amount for one person. This is a really serious thing, and it's a useful reminder that drugs is not just a term that means like, oh yeah, the things you do when you want to be delinquent and sit under the school bleachers, and it's like, the drugs does not just mean fun things that you do at parties, but actually, as I guess is very common in American English, drug also means painkillers. Drug also means Vicks inhalers, and you might need to check the countries you're going into, especially, this is like the most important advice, you're on the internet, you're watching this video, I think ADHD medicine is actively just basically meth. And so a lot of countries, if you don't have a prescription, even some countries if you do have a prescription, will have a serious issue with that. And so, pro tip, if you want to learn one thing from this guy, it should be, don't bring weed into Indonesia, but if you want to learn two things from this guy, it's that you shouldn't bring weed into Indonesia, and you shouldn't bring substances into other countries, because you might get searched, and if you get searched and have the wrong things, you're at best getting deported and losing your money you spent on those flights, and at worst, well, I mean, I don't think we need to say that. With that said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this second channel video. If you did, you might enjoy watching me go for 36 hours in Canada. 36 hours in Canada got a 40-minute video. Here's me at a pub with some Canadians I met. Here's me walking around a little drunkenly getting Donair with some Canadians I met. Very lovely people. Look, oh yeah, look at this. They're oh yeah, so good. The Donair on the east of Canada is made from pork for some reason instead of the other stuff. Super, super good. Love it. I'm gonna have to, actually, if I can have one last tangent for this video, it's that I really wanna, I'm getting very close now to completing Canada. I've got just 4 provinces left to do. I think I might have to go check out the eastern one soon. And so, yeah, my 59 countries is gonna sit relatively sat on, because I've got too many states and too many provinces to tick off for the near future. But yeah, thank you for watching this second channel video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Wait, no. What? I have one last thing, actually. One more tangent about Canada. This is the wildest thing. So I went to Canada on a separate trip to go to Ottawa, the nation's capital. And you know what's fun about Canada? So weed was legalized there in 2018, but they have the weirdest drug laws in Canada, which is to say they don't seem to enforce them. So mushrooms are illegal in Canada, but if I go to Ottawa, literally the nation's capital, this is where they make the laws, including the laws about weed. And so if I then type in mushrooms, because I want to buy some mushrooms, right? I can find them literally here on the same street as Parliament. It's called, What is the name of this street? But it's on Wellington Street. Is Parliament on Wellington Street? Anyway, but if we go there, you can see like, oh, that's Shroomies magic mushrooms right there. And it's been in existence since 2024. And this is weird because you can just go into a store, you can buy a you can buy mushrooms that are effective, according to everyone I know, and then but according to Canada, it's like, did you know you're not allowed to do this? And yeah, did you know it's actually illegal to sell these as well as produce these? But also at the same time, there are stores where you can just buy it. Whereas if you try to walk into a mushroom store in Indonesia, well, I mean, one more time, won't go well for you. They probably won't shoot you right there in the store. But it will happen eventually, and that's why I'd recommend not going to Indonesia if you don't want to be shot. Or if you are going to go to Indonesia, don't bring drugs. But you know, if you're like addicted to drugs, or with that said, thank you for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope that you're addicted to watching second channel videos because they remain legal in all parts of the world. So far, I think. I haven't made any jabs about North Korea yet, and I'm hoping to keep it that way. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you when I see you, because second channel, don't care. Bye.